Welcome back, everybody. Now, with the majority of South Africans set to go to the polls on Monday, voting stations will also be opened between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. today and tomorrow to allow for special votes. The IEC will also be conducting home visits for those unable to get to the voting stations, as about 1.1 million people have applied to vote this weekend. Not only the IEC is going to be busy during this period, but the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, is also preparing to forecast the upcoming local government elections using world-class prediction models. And to talk to us a bit more about this, we're now joined in studio by the CSIR Strategic Partnerships Manager, Dr. Ndumiso Cingo. Dr. Cingo, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
First of all, let's talk about the role that the CSIR will be playing in the upcoming local government elections.
So we will be using our model to predict the outcome of the elections, or more accurately put, to forecast what the outcome is, because we use early results that come in from voting districts to forecast what the outcome is going to be for the rest of the voting districts.
What kind of systems are these and how are they going to work?
So these systems are algorithms or equations, if one could call it that, that are based on studying patterns of voting that we got in the previous election. So we'll take, for example, the results in for the 2019 election at a provincial level, and we then try and group voting districts, the patterns of voting for various parties that the voters would have expressed in those voting districts. And so those that have similar voting patterns, we group them in the same, what we call clusters.
Yes.
It turns out that we end up with roughly 20 clusters of distinct voting patterns.
Sure.
And once we have those, we then forget about the old results, and we just simply work with the voting districts that we have clustered into the 20 clusters. When the IEC begins releasing results, we then take those early results, and depending on which voting district has come in, etc., of course, the voting districts will belong to the various clusters, the 20 I mentioned, and those results, we then assume that if the change for this particular voting district from previous to current is this way, maybe up for one particular party and down for the other, it'll be the same for the rest of the cluster. And we use those results then to project what the outcome is going to be for all voting districts in the end.
I see that you are, relying on data from the previous elections. So what about those who are voting for the first time? How will this be incorporated into these prediction models?
So that's a very good question. In the past, we have had new parties coming on board. And in 2009, there was COPE, and
yes.
EFF came in later on, and so on and so forth. And we've been tweaking the model in order to take into account parties that were not there before. And so there's been an improvement in the performance of the model based on the changes we've made, but taking into account those new parties that have not been there before.
Yeah, so with the predicted outcome versus the actual outcome of the election results, what is it that you're hoping to gain from that? I mean, what's the purpose of the juxtaposition from the prediction and as well as the actual outcomes?
So the main interest for the public is actually that, once voting closes on voting day, 9 p.m., the counting starts, and the IEC begins to release results as and when voting districts are fully counted. But the process, as you know, to complete takes about 3 days or so. The public is interested in knowing already who is going to get what percentage, or which party will get what percentage. And so this model then allows for us, we use the early results to project what the outcome is going to be in those early hours. So as time goes on, on the second, third, and then the final day, the predicted versus the actual results, they converge, or maybe let me say the actual results converge to what the prediction has been saying. Because usually in the beginning, the two are quite far apart.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine that you are hoping that there would be a very slim margin between the predicted and the actual result outcome. But what if it's a far cry from the actual results? What if it's a total contrast over what you've expected? Would this render the prediction model system as an exercise in futility?
So based on past history, we have not had too many of those situations where there was complete, in fact, we've not had a complete misprediction or anything like that. We have had situations where the outcome was slightly different from what the model had predicted, but it's usually within 1-2% of the actual. Where in the past we've had issues, and it might come up in this election, is when we have smaller parties. The model has a bit of a challenge in predicting the outcome for the smaller parties. For the bigger parties, it's usually quite accurate. I think in the last election, we were 0.3% off of the 0.3 to 0.5 of the biggest parties. At that time, there are smaller parties, perhaps 1% or 2% at most. Now that in this election we have many more smaller parties and independents, there may be a challenge, but it remains to be seen. We're also looking forward to that as well.
Now, Dr. Cingo, how closely interlinked are these prediction models with opinion polls? I know that opinion polls in American elections play a huge role in terms of people deciding which party to vote for.
So the opinion polls are based on people's opinions before voting. And when you compare that with this model uses early actual results to give a prediction. Sometimes opinions polls get it right, and sometimes, especially where there is a close contestation or a strong change in sentiment, like it happened in the US elections in 2016.
Yes.
Sometimes the polls get it a bit off or wrong in that instance. Our model, because it uses early results and has been improved over time, has actually performed relatively well most of the time.
Yeah, and I'm made to understand that you make closely with some media houses in terms of them telling the story of the elections. How does that work?
So our main partnership is with the SABC. We deal with the SABC in all its electronic media platforms, TV, radio, etc. But we are allowed as well to engage with other media houses, so they can feel free to contact the CSIR if they would like to get a sense of what the outcome is going to be.
Okay. Dr. Cingo, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that was Dr. Ndumiso Cingo from the CSIR telling us a bit more about their role in the upcoming local government elections and, of course, about their prediction models that they will be using in these local government elections. This is Morning.